Half-Apache. Doctor saves frontier woman left to die in flash flood. Town forces them to marry. The sun had barely risen over the rugged horizon of the frontier town, painting the sky with streaks of orange and gold. The small settlement clung to the edge of a winding river, its wooden cabins scattered unevenly across the rocky terrain. The townsfolk were just beginning their morning chores when a low, distant rumble rolled across the valley. At first, it was barely noticeable, like the growl of a distant animal, but it grew steadily louder, a steady warning that something was amiss. The river, usually calm and lazy, began to churn and foam, swelling with sudden power. The townspeople, though used to the unpredictability of nature, sensed the danger before they could understand it. Miles upstream, a young woman was traveling alone along a narrow river trail, carrying a small bundle of belongings wrapped in cloth. She had been journeying from a neighboring town, hoping to reach the settlement before nightfall. The early morning mist hung low, wrapping the trees and rocks in a ghostly shroud. Birds cried nervously from the trees, as if they sensed the coming peril. The woman paused for a moment to catch her breath, unaware that the rain from the previous days had loosened the soil along the hillsides, making the trail treacherous. Suddenly, the distant rumble became a roar. The river, fed by unseen mountain streams, surged violently. Water cascaded over rocks and debris, tearing branches from trees and sending them hurtling downstream like torpedoes. The woman's heart raced as she realized she had misjudged the danger. A heavy wave of water swept down the slope, catching her off guard. She stumbled and fell, sliding dangerously close to the edge where the current could pull her under in an instant. She tried to grasp at roots and stones, but the soil was slick and treacherous. Panic rose in her chest as the water gushed around her, cold and merciless.
Meanwhile, in the heart of the frontier town, a man known to many as the Half-Apache doctor was preparing for his morning rounds.
A small clinic, a modest wooden structure, sat near the edge of town overlooking the river. He had been trained in both modern medicine and the traditional healing practices of his Apache ancestors. Calm and methodical, he was respected by some townsfolk, misunderstood by others. When he heard the growing roar of the river, he instinctively knew something was wrong. He grabbed a satchel filled with medical supplies and hurried toward the riverbank, eyes scanning for any sign of trouble. As he reached the edge of the river, he saw her, a figure struggling against the merciless current. Her hair was plastered to her face, her clothing soaked and heavy.
Each wave threatened to sweep her away.
Without hesitation, the doctor waded into the water. He knew the river well, but even with his knowledge, the current was strong enough to pull a grown man off his feet. Step by step he advanced, keeping his eyes locked on the woman, calculating every move. He shouted instructions to calm her, but the roar of the flood made his words almost inaudible. The woman, terrified and exhausted, caught sight of him. For a moment she thought she was seeing a miracle, a man willing to risk his own life for hers. Her hands, numb from the cold and the effort to hold onto anything stable, reached out desperately. The doctor extended a steady hand, and after a tense struggle against the water's strength, managed to grasp hers. Using every ounce of his strength and experience, he pulled her toward the shore. Rocks, branches, and debris threatened to strike them, but his focus never wavered. He spoke to her calmly, assuring her that she would be safe if she held on. By after what felt like hours, though it was only minutes, they reached a small rise above the river, where the water's force was lessened. Both were drenched, shivering violently from the cold, but alive. The doctor quickly checked her for injuries, cuts, bruises, and the potential for hypothermia. Her pulse was weak but steady, and she had sustained no broken bones, though exhaustion had left her trembling. He wrapped her in a heavy blanket he had brought in his satchel, trying to warm her body with his hands. She clung to the blanket, grateful for the warmth and safety, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear, relief, and awe. As the floodwaters raged behind them, the doctor looked around to assess the situation. Trees had been uprooted. The river had swallowed parts of the trail, and debris floated past like dangerous rats. He knew the woman was lucky to have survived.
"You're strong," he said quietly, not to boast, but to reassure her.
But tears mingling with the rain, and river water still clinging to her face. In that moment, a silent understanding passed between them. Life was fragile, and courage was measured not just in strength, but in the willingness to face danger for another. They stayed on the rise until the flood began to recede slightly, using the moment to catch their breath and plan the next steps. The doctor knew that the town was not far away and help could be found if they moved carefully, but the woman, still shaking and weak, could barely walk. He supported her, guiding her through the muddy terrain, carefully avoiding loose rocks and hidden hazards. She marveled at his skill not just in medicine but in navigating the wild and dangerous landscape. He moved with a quiet confidence, his every action showing experience, intelligence, and care. As they approached the outskirts of the town, some of the townsfolk began to gather, drawn by the commotion of the flood and the cries for help. Their faces showed relief and concern as they recognized the danger had been narrowly avoided. The woman, still leaning heavily on the doctor, realized how fortunate she had been, not just to survive, but to be saved by someone with courage and skill. Whispers spread through the crowd about the Half-Apache doctor, a man who was sometimes misunderstood, but who had just proven his worth beyond doubt.
The doctor finally helped her to a safe cabin on the edge of town, where the warmth of a fire awaited.
He tended to her further, removing the wet clothes and wrapping her in dry blankets. Her teeth chattered from the cold, and her body still trembled from shock. He offered her water and simple food, speaking softly, explaining what had happened and ensuring she understood she was now safe. She listened, grateful for his presence, and for the first time since the disaster began, felt a sense of peace. That night, as the floodwaters continued to rage outside, the woman watched the doctor move quietly around the cabin. There was something calm and steady about him, a presence that seemed larger than his physical form. He checked the fire, secured the door against the wind and rain, and returned to ensure she was comfortable. She realized that he had risked everything to save a stranger, and her heart filled with admiration. There was no rush to speak, no need to explain, just the quiet acknowledgement of the bond that had begun in the most dangerous of circumstances. By dawn, the flood had begun to retreat, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. Trees were toppled, fences torn apart, and the path she had traveled was barely recognizable. Yet the woman was alive, safe, and beginning to recover thanks to the courage and skill of a man who bridged two worlds, one rooted in modern knowledge, the other in ancient traditions. She did not yet know the full story of the doctor or the challenges he faced as a Half-Apache man in a town that was often wary of him. But she understood that he had a strength that came not just from skill, but from a deep sense of humanity and honor. As the townsfolk emerged from their cabins to survey the damage, they could see the aftermath of the flood and the miraculous rescue. The woman stood beside the doctor, supported and safe, a living testament to bravery and compassion. Oh, the storm had tested the limits of nature and humanity. It had also revealed the best in both. And as she looked at the doctor, she knew that this was only the beginning of a story shaped by courage, survival, and the unpredictable paths that life on the frontier often demanded. After the floodwaters had receded and the town began to recover from the chaos, the young woman stayed in the cabin where the Half-Apache doctor had brought her. The warmth of the fire was comforting, but more than that, it was the presence of the doctor that made her feel safe. Her body was still weak, and her mind felt exhausted from the shock of nearly losing her life. Every time she looked at him, she remembered the rushing water, the force that had tried to sweep her away, and the calm strength in his eyes as he reached for her hand. Ray. She had been terrified. Yet now she felt a deep gratitude she could not yet put into words. The doctor, meanwhile, had settled into a quiet routine. He tended to her wounds carefully, cleaning cuts and bruises with gentle hands, dressing them in fresh bandages and applying salves he had carried for emergencies. He did not rush, knowing that her body needed time to heal. He also prepared simple meals, porridge, bread, and boiled herbs. To restore her strength, she ate slowly, feeling the warmth return to her body, and noticed how patient he was, never speaking in a way that made her feel hurried or ashamed of her weakness. Over the first few days, a subtle bond began to form. The doctor would ask her simple questions about her life, where she came from, and her family. As she, still shaken, hesitated at first, unsure what to reveal to a man she had only just met, yet who had risked everything to save her. Slowly, she began to speak, telling him about her small hometown, the work she had done, and the journey that had brought her to the frontier settlement. Breaths until live a meaningful life, to help others if she could, and the quiet fear she carried, traveling alone in such dangerous terrain. The doctor listened with genuine interest. He shared some of his own story, carefully choosing what to tell. He explained that he had grown up learning the healing traditions of his Apache heritage, while also studying medicine from a traveling physician who had trained him. He spoke of the challenges of being part of two worlds, the native community that raised him, and the townspeople who often looked at him with suspicion or doubt. Through his words, the woman saw the depth of his character, a man shaped by resilience, courage, and compassion. She began to admire not only his skill but the way he carried himself. Quietly confident yet humble, strong yet gentle. Each day they worked together to restore not only her health but also her spirit. He taught her to forage safely for herbs along the river banks, showing her which plants could help with injuries or strengthen the body. They walked slowly through the small forested areas near the town, and he spoke about the balance of nature, how the land could be both harsh and nurturing. She listened intently, fascinated by his knowledge and the way he respected the natural world. It was a new way of seeing life for her, one that combined practicality with wisdom, and it drew her closer to him. Evenings were spent quietly in the cabin. The woman would sit by the fire, her hands wrapped around a warm cup of tea, while the doctor tended to his herbs or prepared medicines. But sometimes they would speak softly about hopes and fears. Other times they sat in comfortable silence, listening to the wind and the distant calls of birds returning after the storm. The quiet moments felt intimate, safe, and yet full of unspoken understanding. She began to see him not just as a rescuer, but as someone she could trust completely. One afternoon, the doctor noticed her staring at the river outside the cabin, lost in thought. She confessed that she had been terrified during the flood. But she also admitted that the fear had taught her something important, how fragile life could be and how every moment mattered. The doctor nodded, understanding her feelings deeply. "We cannot always control the forces around us," he said gently, "but we can control how we respond. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it." She reflected on his words, realizing that she had indeed acted, by clinging to hope, by trusting him, and by surviving. As the days turned into a week, she grew stronger. Her body recovered, and with it, her mind cleared from the fog of trauma. She began to help the doctor around the cabin, assisting with preparing meals, cleaning, and organizing his medical supplies. Though small and simple, these tasks gave her a sense of purpose. The doctor encouraged her, always patient and kind, never belittling her efforts, and in return, she began to feel capable and confident again. Their shared work created a rhythm, a sense of normalcy that neither had expected after such a sudden disaster. Outside the cabin, the town was abuzz with talk of the flood and the rescue. Some townsfolk expressed admiration for the doctor, while others whispered about his heritage with cautious curiosity. The woman, though grateful for the doctor, began to feel the weight of their expectations. She could see the townspeople looking at him differently now, some with awe, some with skepticism, and she realized that their presence alone had become a story for the town. Despite the attention, she found comfort in the doctor's consistent calm, knowing that he did not care for their judgments, only for her safety and recovery. One afternoon, as the sun warmed the land, the doctor guided her to a nearby spring to bathe and wash her clothes. The journey was slow, with careful steps over wet and uneven terrain, but it was also peaceful. Birds sang and the smell of damp earth mixed with wildflowers, reminding them both that life continued despite the hardships. At the spring, she marveled at the doctor's careful instructions on using the water to heal and refresh, his knowledge both practical and soothing.
She felt a connection not only to him but also to the natural world he revered.
As the week progressed, she realized that her admiration for the doctor had deepened into something more, a respect and affection that she had not expected. She was drawn to his strength, his kindness, and his quiet confidence. He in turn began to notice the resilience and courage she displayed. Though she had been terrified, she had survived, and she met each day with a growing determination to recover and contribute. Their bond was no longer just about survival. It was about understanding, shared experience, and the beginning of trust.
One evening, as the sun dipped low, painting the sky with shades of pink and purple, the doctor sat beside her by the fire.
He spoke softly of the challenges he had faced in life, of the prejudice he had endured, and of the ways he had learned to navigate both the town and the wild. She listened closely, her heart opening with empathy and admiration. She shared her own fears of living in such a harsh environment, of traveling alone, and of facing dangers she had not imagined. In that quiet moment, they both realized that they had found in each other not only friendship but a rare understanding. Through their time together, they also shared small joys. A warm meal after a cold day, the laughter that came from clumsy efforts to gather firewood, the quiet thrill of seeing animals return to the flooded areas. Each small moment strengthened their connection, building a foundation of trust and companionship. The woman, who had once been terrified and alone, now felt a sense of belonging. She realized that she could rely on someone else, that she could share her fears and hopes without judgment. By the end of the second week, the woman was fully recovered physically, though the memory of the flood lingered in her mind. She had grown to respect and care for the doctor deeply, and she could see that he felt the same. Their conversations had become more personal, more thoughtful, and even when they worked silently, their connection was evident. They had endured danger, hardship, and uncertainty together, and through it all a bond had formed that neither could ignore. The townspeople, noticing her recovery and the presence of the doctor, began to speak in whispers about the two of them. Some were curious, some approving, others wary. But within the cabin, none of that mattered. The woman and the doctor had found something stronger than rumors or expectations. They had found trust, courage, and a growing sense of companionship that went beyond the boundaries of the town. The flood had brought them together, but it was their shared experience, respect, and understanding that now held them close. As night fell, the doctor checked her one last time before sleep. Her body was warm and strong, and her spirit lighter than it had been since the flood. He looked at her, noticing the subtle changes, the way her eyes reflected curiosity and strength, the small but confident gestures she made in helping around the cabin, and the growing comfort in her presence. She, in turn, looked at him and saw a man shaped by courage and wisdom, someone who had risked everything to save a stranger and had guided her through the recovery with patience and care. In the quiet of the frontier night, with the wind whispering through the trees and the river now calm, they both understood that their connection was more than mere circumstance. It was the beginning of a story built on trust, courage, and the human heart. Each had faced fear, uncertainty, and hardship, and together they had found a way to survive and grow. As they drifted into sleep, side by side but respecting each other's space, there was a shared understanding that life could be harsh, but with courage and companionship, it could also be full of hope, resilience, and unexpected friendship. The town had begun to recover from the flood, but the memory of the disaster lingered in every corner. Mud still coated the streets. Some fences lay broken, and the riverbank bore scars of the rushing water. News traveled quickly in the small settlement, and everyone soon learned about the rescue that had taken place on the river's edge. Whispers carried through the town about the young woman who had been saved from the flood, and the Half-Apache doctor who had risked his life to save her. Some townspeople praised his bravery, while others murmured with curiosity or doubt about a man who did not entirely fit the usual expectations of their community. The woman, now recovered and stronger, began to realize that the town's attention was more than just polite admiration. She noticed neighbors staring as she walked through the streets, some with smiles, some with raised eyebrows. Mothers whispered to their children, and shopkeepers nodded in recognition. Ops! All eyes seemed to follow the doctor when he came into town to gather supplies or tend to patients. While the woman had found safety and companionship with him, the outside world had started to intrude, bringing new pressure she had not anticipated. It was the town elders who finally made their decision. Gathered in the main hall of the settlement, they debated what should be done about the two of them. Some argued that the doctor's actions were heroic and deserving of recognition, while others focused on the proprieties of the frontier and the town's expectations. "Pray, he saved her life," one elder said. "That is not just bravery, it is honor. In our town, such an act cannot go without consequence." Another added, "It is only proper that the young woman should be cared for, and a marriage seems the most fitting way to ensure her protection and social acceptance." Their voices carried authority, and soon it was clear. The town expected the doctor and the woman to marry. When the doctor first heard the news, he felt a mixture of disbelief and discomfort. He had never sought recognition for his actions, nor did he desire the town's approval. Marriage, he knew, was a personal commitment, not a social obligation, and he was wary of being forced into a role he had not chosen. Yet the pressure was undeniable. The townspeople began to watch him closely, expecting him to comply with their wishes. The young woman, too, felt the weight of the town's expectations pressing upon her. She respected and cared for the doctor, but she was frightened. Was the bond they shared truly hers, or was it being shaped by the town's insistence and the extraordinary circumstances of her rescue?
As the days passed, the tension between them grew.
The doctor attempted to maintain his calm demeanor, continuing to tend to his work and help the woman recover fully, but the looming expectation of marriage created an unspoken strain.
He noticed the way townspeople would watch them, how whispers would follow them in the streets, and how even casual conversations seemed to carry hidden meaning.
The woman, on her part, felt torn between gratitude, affection, and the fear that her feelings were being dictated by circumstance. She found herself questioning her own heart, wondering if she could ever truly see him as a partner rather than a savior. The two of them spent long evenings talking by the fire, trying to understand their feelings. "I did what anyone would have done," the doctor said one night. "I could not leave you to the water. But marriage, that is not my choice to make lightly. It must come from the heart, not the town." She listened quietly, her mind racing. She understood his words, but she also knew that the town might not leave them a choice. The fear of disapproval and judgment loomed over both of them, yet their conversations were honest, filled with care, and slowly helped to ease the tension. Despite their fears, the woman began to notice the strength and patience in the doctor's character. Even under the scrutiny of the town, he remained composed, never yielding to anger or pride.
He continued his work, treating patients, gathering herbs, and helping the community recover from the flood.
She saw how deeply he cared for others, how he balanced the needs of the town with his own sense of justice and fairness. Slowly, she realized that the man who had saved her life was not only brave, but also wise, compassionate, and strong in ways she had never experienced before. The townspeople, however, did not let go easily. Conversations began to emerge in the market, in the church, and along the streets. Some families saw the union as beneficial, praising the doctor's skill and character, while others questioned his heritage and his place in the community.
He is Half-Apache, some whispered.
Can he truly fit into our town's ways? Others countered, pointing to his bravery and knowledge. The debate grew, but in every argument, one point was clear. The town expected the two to marry. The young woman felt the pressure mounting with each passing day, her heart caught between gratitude, admiration, and fear. As the week progressed, the doctor and woman found themselves spending more time together not just in work or conversation, but in small acts of companionship. He taught her how to check the health of animals, how to gather herbs safely, and how to read the signs of the land. Disparity. She helped him organize supplies and tended to patients under his guidance. Through these shared activities, they discovered a rhythm and understanding that went beyond the town's expectations. But though they were being watched, their bond began to grow organically, rooted in shared experience rather than obligation. One afternoon, while checking on flood-damaged farmland, the doctor noticed the woman's unease. "The town is watching," she admitted softly, "and I do not know what to do. I want to respect you, but I feel trapped by what they expect." He nodded, understanding completely. "We cannot control what the town says," he replied. "But we can control what we choose for ourselves. If we act from our hearts, then we honor both ourselves and each other." She considered his words carefully, realizing that despite the town's pressure, she had agency, and that the connection she felt with him was real, even if complicated. That evening, they returned to the cabin together. The sun had set and the sky glowed with faint stars. The woman reflected on the week in the flood, on the fear she had faced and the courage she had discovered in herself. She realized that the doctor had taught her more than survival. He had shown her patience, wisdom, and the quiet strength of someone who acts with honor and compassion. Their bond was no longer just about life and death. It was about respect, understanding, and the possibility of partnership, even in the face of societal expectation. The doctor, for his part, was aware of the growing admiration he felt for the woman. He recognized her intelligence, resilience, and gentle courage. Her questions about herbs, healing, and the land were not mere curiosity. They were thoughtful, demonstrating her desire to learn and contribute. He respected that deeply, seeing her not as someone saved, but as someone who could stand beside him, share his work, and understand the responsibilities of life on the frontier. Yet, the tension with the town remained. Rumors continued to circulate, and whispers were harder to escape than the flood's waters had been. Some neighbors offered advice, while others judged quietly from a distance. The young woman and the doctor were forced to navigate not only their personal feelings but also the expectations and scrutiny of an entire community. Every smile, every gesture, every act of kindness became a point of discussion, yet neither of them let the town control their interactions. They learned to balance social expectation with personal choice, finding ways to maintain dignity, respect. One morning, the doctor brought the woman to the riverbank. The water, now calm, reflected the sky and the surrounding trees. He pointed out how the flood had changed the landscape, how life had returned despite the destruction. "The town may try to shape us," he said quietly, "but like this river, we must find our own course, steady and true, no matter the obstacles." She looked at him, inspired by his metaphor, and felt a growing determination to face the challenges together. She realized that while the town could expect marriage, it could not dictate the feelings that were slowly growing between them. As the days turned into weeks, the couple's connection deepened. They shared knowledge, laughter, and quiet moments, building trust and understanding. While the pressure from the town was ever present, it no longer dictated their interactions. They began to consider what their relationship could become, not just what the town demanded. And in those moments of reflection, they each recognized a growing respect and affection that had started long before the town's interference, born in the chaos of the flood and strengthened through the shared journey of recovery and survival. By the end of part 3, both the doctor and the woman understood that they were at a crossroads. The town expected one path, but their hearts might guide them on another. They had survived danger together, faced societal pressure, and learned to trust one another. What they would choose next, obedience to the town or following their own hearts, remained uncertain. Yet, in the quiet understanding between them, it was clear that their connection was real, resilient, and capable of enduring the scrutiny, prejudice, and challenges of frontier life. Life in the frontier town had slowly returned to a sense of normalcy after the flood, but for the Half-Apache doctor and the young woman he had saved. Normalcy carried a new weight, separation. The town's expectations pressed on them both like a heavy shadow, yet the bond they had formed during her rescue and recovery remained strong, growing quietly beneath the surface. Each day brought new challenges. Small, everyday tasks of frontier life interwoven with the invisible but relentless pressure from neighbors and elders. Every glance from a passerby, every whispered conversation, reminded them that the town had its own ideas of what their relationship should be. The woman had fully regained her strength, but she remained cautious. Bud. She was grateful for the doctor's care and admired his courage, yet she could not shake the worry that her own feelings were being shaped by circumstance rather than choice. The doctor, aware of this, made a point of giving her space while still guiding her in recovery. He encouraged her to speak her mind, to share her opinions, and to take part in decisions regarding her life. Their growing connection was built on respect and trust, and both valued that more than the town's approval. The townspeople, however, had not forgotten the dramatic rescue. Stories of the doctor braving the flood to save the young woman were retold with embellishment in every corner of the settlement. Some praised his bravery endlessly, while others murmured uneasily about his heritage. It was a constant reminder that society's gaze was heavy, and the couple could not act freely without being observed. The doctor recognized the subtle prejudices behind these whispers, but refused to let them dictate his actions. He focused on the woman's well-being and the needs of the town, finding a balance between service to others and personal integrity. As they spent more time together, they began to learn the small rhythms of each other's personalities. She noticed the quiet focus he brought to his work, the careful way he arranged his medical supplies, the precise movements when tending to herbs or bandaging a wound. She admired his intelligence and calm demeanor, and she began to understand that the courage she had witnessed during the flood was not only physical but also emotional and mental. He had a way of staying composed even when danger loomed, and she felt reassured by his presence. He, in turn, recognized her resilience. She had survived the flood, faced fear beyond what many in the town could imagine, and now approached each day with curiosity and determination. Pressure, she remained thoughtful and honest, asking questions, expressing her feelings, and contributing to the recovery of the community. He saw in her a strength that matched his own, a courage that was not loud or showy but steady, enduring, and real. She helped him tend to patients, learning to administer basic care under his guidance. She observed his methods, listened to his explanations, and slowly gained confidence in her own abilities.
Together they repaired homes damaged by the flood, cleared debris and restored fields to make them usable again.
Perspectives deepened their bond, not through romantic gestures, but through mutual respect, cooperation, and the sense of purpose that came from helping others. Yet even as they grew closer, the town's expectations weighed heavily. The elders continued to insist that the doctor and the young woman formalize their relationship through marriage. They argued that it was proper, that the woman's life should be secured, and that the doctor's bravery deserved recognition in the form of a union. The pressure created tension between the couple, though neither wished to argue openly.
They were caught between personal feelings and social obligation, trying to navigate a path that respected both themselves and the community around them.
One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky with warm shades of orange and pink, the doctor and woman sat on the porch of the cabin. They watched the river, now calm and reflective after the storm, and spoke quietly about their thoughts and fears. "It is not easy," she admitted softly, "to know what is expected of us, and yet not feel ready to follow it." He nodded, understanding fully. The town sees only what they want to see. They cannot understand the bond we have or the choices we must make. What matters is what we decide together. She felt comforted by his words, realizing that despite the pressure, their connection was genuine and independent of the town's influence. Over time, small gestures began to reveal deeper emotions. He would bring her water or warm blankets before she even asked. She would prepare meals for him, careful and thoughtful, noticing the long hours he spent helping others. These acts, simple yet meaningful, reflected a growing sense of care and consideration. Neither spoke of love in the beginning, but each recognized the quiet affection developing between them, an understanding that went beyond words and circumstance. Their bond was tested one day when a group of townsfolk arrived at the cabin, curious and insistent. They asked questions about the doctor, the woman, and the circumstances of the flood. Their tone, though polite, carried subtle judgment and expectation. The couple maintained composure, answering honestly but carefully. The doctor's calm and measured responses impressed some, while others muttered under their breath about propriety and tradition. The woman realized that, while the town might continue to observe and pressure them, she had gained confidence in her own voice and her ability to speak alongside him. Despite the scrutiny, there were moments of genuine joy. They discovered laughter in small victories, repairing a broken fence, successfully treating a patient, or simply enjoying a warm meal together. The doctor taught her how to identify edible plants and healing herbs, and she eagerly absorbed every lesson. In turn, she shared stories of her travels, insights about life beyond the town, and her dreams for the future. Through these exchanges, their companionship transformed from survival to partnership, founded on mutual respect and shared experience.
He glances around in despair. The townspeople could see the change, though they did not fully understand it.
Whispers continued, but some began to recognize that the doctor and the woman were more than a tale of rescue and expectation. They were becoming a team, capable of navigating the challenges of frontier life together. This quiet acknowledgement, though subtle, allowed the couple a sense of independence, a small space in which to cultivate their bond free from immediate judgment. One day, after weeks of recovery and shared work, the woman asked the doctor to teach her more advanced medical skills. She wanted to contribute meaningfully to the town, not simply be a passive observer. He agreed, seeing her determination and intelligence, and patiently instructed her in basic first aid, herbal remedies, and patient care. She absorbed the lessons eagerly, asking questions, practicing, and growing confident in her abilities. Their relationship deepened not only through companionship, but through the shared pursuit of knowledge and service. As the days passed, they also faced internal challenges. Both struggled with the idea of a forced marriage, uncertain if their growing feelings were genuine or influenced by the town's expectations. They talked openly about these fears, sharing doubts and insecurities. "We cannot let the town dictate our hearts," the doctor said one evening. "If our bond is real, it will survive pressure. If it is not, we must be honest with ourselves and each other." She listened and felt a surge of respect and gratitude. He valued honesty and integrity above appearances, and she began to trust him completely. Their understanding of one another deepened further during quiet moments when words were unnecessary. Bearing the land, or simply tending to tasks in silence, they learned to anticipate each other's needs and respect personal space. The woman noticed how his presence brought calm and focus, how he remained steady even in chaos. The doctor recognized her growing resilience, her capacity to act with courage, and her thoughtful approach to life. Each saw in the other a complement to their own strengths, a partnership that had begun in crisis, but was evolving into something enduring. By the end of this part of their story, the doctor and woman had developed a profound bond rooted in respect, shared experience, and growing affection. Though the town's pressure remained, it no longer dictated their interactions or emotions. They had begun to see each other not merely as rescuer and rescued, but as equals, capable of standing together in the face of adversity. The forced expectations of society had brought them together. But it was trust, understanding, and shared effort that would define the true nature of their partnership. In the quiet hours before sleep, the woman reflected on the past weeks. She had faced fear, survived danger, and discovered courage she had never known. She had also discovered a man whose presence was both steady and inspiring, a man who valued integrity, compassion, and honor above all. She realized that while the town might continue to watch and expect, the decisions about her heart and her life were ultimately her own, and, for the first time, she felt ready to face them alongside him, as a partner, not merely as someone saved.
The months following the flood had brought not only physical recovery to the town, but also a shift in its people's perspective.
The once chaotic settlement now bore signs of life returning to its routines. Fields had been repaired, homes rebuilt, and the river, though still unpredictable, flowed calmly through the valley. In the midst of this renewal, the Half-Apache doctor and the young woman he had saved had grown into a partnership that was no longer defined solely by circumstance, but by respect, shared experience, and deepening affection. Their bond, tested in the crucible of disaster and the pressure of society, had become strong and enduring. The doctor continued his work as the town's healer, combining the medical knowledge he had learned from modern medicine with the traditional wisdom of his Apache heritage. He treated injuries and illness, tended to the sick, and taught the townsfolk about the benefits of herbs, proper care, and preventative measures. The woman, now confident in her abilities, worked closely with him.
She had learned to administer basic treatments, recognize signs of illness, and prepare herbal remedies under his guidance. Together they offered a level of care that the town had never known, earning respect not just for their skills but also for their dedication and compassion.
The townspeople, who had once whispered about the doctor's heritage and questioned his place among them, began to notice the value of his work and the quiet strength of the young woman.
Over time, admiration replaced suspicion.
Mothers brought children to him for treatment, farmers sought advice for injured livestock, and even the elders began to acknowledge his contributions. They watched the woman stand beside him, offering guidance, comfort, and skill, and they could no longer dismiss the pair as merely a story of obligation or social expectation. Their partnership had proven its worth, and slowly, the town began to accept it. With acceptance came a sense of freedom. The doctor and the woman could finally act without the constant gaze of judgment. They spent their days tending to the community and supporting one another, building a life together that was grounded in shared responsibility, mutual respect, and genuine care. They discovered joy in simple moments, walking together through the forest to gather herbs, sharing meals by the cabin's fire, and observing the changing seasons along the riverbank.
Each day strengthened their bond, revealing the depth of affection that had quietly grown over time. One spring morning, the doctor and the woman decided to visit the river where the flood had first brought them together.
Standing on the bank, they observed the calm waters and reflected on the events that had changed their lives. The young woman looked at him with gratitude and admiration. "If it weren't for you," she said softly, "I might not have survived. But it's more than that. You taught me courage, patience, and the value of trust." The doctor smiled, a quiet, steady expression. "You taught me too," he replied. "You reminded me why hope and perseverance matter. Together, we are stronger than either of us alone."
In that moment, the bond they had forged in crisis was reaffirmed as a conscious choice, a partnership built on respect and love rather than obligation.
Life continued with its challenges. Illnesses arose, storms threatened, and disagreements with townsfolk occasionally tested their patience.
Yet they faced each obstacle as a team, their experiences during the flood and the early days of recovery giving them perspective. They communicated openly, respected each other's opinions, and relied on the strengths each brought to the partnership.
The doctor's calm, measured approach balanced the woman's determination and empathy, creating a harmony that strengthened both their work and their relationship. The town's acceptance grew gradually, and eventually, the elders approached them with a gesture of recognition.
You have proven yourselves, one elder said, not just in courage, but in wisdom, care, and service to this community. Your partnership is worthy of respect.
Though the words were formal, they carried a deep significance. The town that had once pressed them into a path of forced marriage now acknowledged their autonomy and the genuine connection they had formed. The young woman and the doctor felt a quiet satisfaction in this recognition, understanding that their choices and their bond had won respect through action rather than compliance. With the town's approval, they began to formalize their partnership in a way that felt meaningful to them. They married, not out of obligation, but as a celebration of the life they had chosen together. The ceremony was simple, held in the town square, with neighbors, friends, and family in attendance. There was no extravagance, only warmth, respect, and a shared sense of joy. The townspeople who had doubted them now witnessed a union forged in courage, compassion, and mutual understanding. Applause, smiles, and heartfelt congratulations surrounded them, signaling the town's full acceptance of their bond. Following their marriage, life for the couple settled into a fulfilling rhythm. The doctor continued to serve as the town's healer, and the woman assisted him, bringing her knowledge, empathy, and energy to their work. Together, they treated the sick, educated the community about health, and supported neighbors in times of need. Their home became a place of comfort and learning, where people could seek guidance and care without fear. The partnership that had begun in crisis now thrived in everyday life, strengthened by shared responsibility and mutual respect. Beyond their work, they cultivated a life rich with companionship and simple joys. They celebrated small victories, the first successful harvest after the flood, a child recovering from illness, or the restoration of a damaged home. They laughed together at minor mishaps, found quiet satisfaction in completing tasks side by side, and shared stories of the past and dreams for the future. Each day brought opportunities to strengthen their connection, creating a partnership that was both enduring and deeply satisfying. Through all of this, the young woman and the doctor learned to navigate the complexities of frontier life together. They encountered prejudice and challenges, but they faced them united, supporting one another through both triumphs and setbacks. Their marriage was not merely a social arrangement, it was a living example of trust, courage, and the power of genuine partnership. Their story inspired others in the town, demonstrating that respect, understanding, and shared effort could overcome fear, prejudice, and uncertainty. As the years passed, their bond only deepened. They grew to understand each other intuitively, anticipating needs, offering support, and finding comfort in shared experiences. The doctor's quiet wisdom and the woman's resilience complemented one another, creating a partnership that was balanced and enduring. They remained deeply involved in the town, offering guidance, healing, and mentorship to those who followed. Their lives, once shaped by disaster and expectation, had become a testament to perseverance, courage, and the human capacity for connection. One late afternoon, standing together by the river where it all began, the couple reflected on their journey. The water flowed calmly, the trees swayed gently in the breeze, and the town thrived around them.
"We have come far," the woman said softly. "From that day in the flood to now."
I never imagined we would find something real in the midst of such chaos. The doctor nodded, taking her hand in his. Life may have brought us together by chance, but we built this together.
Our bond is stronger than circumstance, stronger than expectation. It is ours.
They stood in quiet contentment, knowing that the trials of the past had led them to a life of partnership, respect, and enduring love. Their story became a quiet legend in the town, a tale of bravery, compassion, and the unexpected ways in which life could bring people together. Children would hear of the flood and the doctor's daring rescue, and neighbors would recount the partnership that followed, emphasizing the courage, patience, and integrity that defined it. But, for the doctor and the woman, however, the significance was personal. They had discovered in each other a partnership built not on obligation, but on mutual respect, trust, and affection. Past and the town changed. They remained steadfast in their work, their home, and their bond. They celebrated the milestones of life together, successes in their work, the growth of the community, and quiet personal moments that reflected their shared history. They found joy in routine, satisfaction in service, and comfort in the enduring presence of one another.
The love that had grown from survival, respect, and shared experience became the foundation of their lives, stronger than any societal expectation or challenge.
In the quiet evenings, as the sun set over the river, they would sit together by the fire or on the porch, reflecting on their journey. The doctor would recount lessons learned from the land and the people, while the woman would share insights from her own experiences and travels. Their conversations were filled with laughter, wisdom, and the deep understanding that only comes from years of shared challenges and triumphs. They had not only survived the storm of nature, but also navigated the storm of society's expectations, emerging with a bond that was genuine, enduring, and celebrated. By the end of this chapter in their lives, the doctor and the woman had created a partnership that transcended the circumstances of its beginning. They had turned a moment of crisis into a lifetime of collaboration, trust, and affection. The town that had once pressured them now admired and respected them, and their story became an inspiration for future generations, a testament to courage, resilience, and the power of human connection.
Together they had discovered that love and partnership were not about obligation or social expectation, but about shared values, mutual respect, and the willingness to face life's challenges hand in hand. And so, the Half-Apache doctor and the young woman who had been left to die in the flood lived out their lives together, united not just by circumstance but by choice, building a life of service, joy, and enduring partnership.
Their story was one of courage and compassion, a true tale of two people finding one another in the most unexpected of ways and choosing to stay together through every challenge that life could bring.